Hi, welcome to Cinema Then, Cinema Now, the film series with lively discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach cinema studies at the College of Staten Island of the City University of New York. Today we continue our five-part series, Glasnost and the Soviet Cinema. We'll be seeing a film called Red Pomegranates, or it's alternatively called The Color of Pomegranates or Sayat Nova. We'll be talking about that unusual title and a number of other things after today's film, which is a visually magnificent tapestry of images from the Armenian section of the Soviet Union. We'll be talking about some other things as well with today's guest, Professor Vladimir Petrić of Harvard University. Enjoy the visually magnificent Red Pomegranate. Okay, right. Hi, welcome back to Cinema Then, Cinema Now. I think you've had a chance to see a visually extraordinary film, and a film that's unusual in a whole set of ways. We're able to talk about that unusualness, how it fits into certain patterns, how it doesn't really fit into many patterns over the next 30 minutes. My guest today is Professor Vladimir Petrić, and I'd like to take this moment to introduce him to you. Vlada is a professor of film history and theory at Harvard University. He has written in a number of journals, in fact several languages through his career. His most recent book-length publication in English is Constructivism in Film, which is a study of C.J. Vertov's Man with a Movie Camera. He also serves as curator of the Harvard Film Archives, and that leads us to the fact that in fact, Vlada, quite recently, you've given a talk at the Harvard Film Archives on Sergei Parajanov's most recent film, which is Ashik Karib. How does that film, which is only being shown here in the United States in the late 80s, how does that fit in with his career and with this film that we've seen today?
Very good, but one correction. I'm talking on Parajanov, his film Ashik Karib, on December 2nd.
Oh, okay.
Well, maybe it's not important so much.
Well,
if some of your students want to come, we welcome you.
Okay, well, they won't see the show until sometime in the spring, so
yes,
that's...
But we are showing the film, so if they want, they would come and we can discuss it. It would be interesting to exchange.
Oh, absolutely.
But your questions, I think, is very interesting because I just saw several times this film because I have to talk about it. And you just showed Colors of Pomegranate, and this is his recent film.
Right.
But Ashik Karib, which is based on the famous short novel by Lermontov, is a beautiful, beautiful film, which belongs to the group of Parajanov's film that I call staring movies.
Staring movies.
Yeah, which means where the camera basically stares at objects, characters, or events that take place in front of the camera, the mise en scène, as opposed or in contrast to his moving movies, as Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, where camera is in constant travelings and penetration through the space, and montage. So I think these are two different films, and they are similar. Colors of Pomegranate is the film where basically the principle is that every shot represents a tableau. And the audience is expected not so much to be led narratively or narratologically through the events, but to be involved and to find for themselves what is important and how to read the image, as well as the action that takes place within the frame.
And he fits into a tradition of filmmaking, I think, that it's not exclusively by any means Soviet. I mean, there's a whole international tradition of filmmakers who make us inspect the image,
Yeah.
image by image, instead of moving rapidly from one image to another. I mean,
Exactly. You know, there are a lot of people who follow this Bazinian principle.
Right.
I think Bazin would be enchanted to see Parajanov's film, because that's exactly what he stood for when he criticized Eisenstein's montage and dynamic exchange of shots, parallel editings, as well as Tarkovsky, who in his book has a marvelous criticism, I mean creative criticism of montage structure, as opposed to what they think to give the audience, but not a simple shot, but shot which is very complicated, so that there is a sort of a montage within the shot. You have various structures, which I call mise-en shot, or even I invented another term, mise-en frame. I think this is the best term.
Okay.
You have a frame in Parajanov's films which you know, covers a area where many things are happening, and he wants you. I asked him why you are. I was interested why he changed his style. You know, because I still think, for myself, my own, I don't know what would you agree with me, that the style that he used in Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors is super cinematic. My theory is that film has to be cinematic above all, and then all the rest, or kinesthetic. Yeah. Well, many, you can say that a lot of this is all cinematic, but I don't think that it has enough of kinesthesia, which I mean by kinesthesia, something that's occurring on the screen by the changes of the image, movement of the camera, interaction between the trackings and the mise-en-scène, which creates what I call mise-en shot, where all these things, and which is kinesthetic, something that moves your sensory motor centers, triggers them, that you can't have by perceiving painting or theater or television image that we are now studying.
Well, that's a way in which I think a certain kind of critic of the later Parajanov, the Philistine critic, would say nothing is happening. Okay, I mean that's the Philistine critic who's saying this is boring, but it's not true, because just following what you said, it's as if Parajanov, like Tarkovsky, takes what Bazin prescribed in his very famous essay on montage versus mise-en-scène, and wanted William Wyler, whom I don't mean this as any disparaging of Wyler, whom I have a very, very high regard for, but this is the pushing of the limit of that sort of thing, so that you have these multiple planes of action and interest. Yet at the same time, it is a painterly aesthetic. It does have this relationship. You've got movement within the frame, but it does have a closer relationship with perhaps the stasis we associate even with the kind of painting that has multiple principles of action within it that we move.
I would agree with you, but in Parajanov's case, we have many filmmakers who are simply using a staring camera. They focus on event or very picturesque, as a pictorial structure, be it landscape or arrangement of people and objects within the interior. And that's it. And in that case, it is sort of an imitation of the aesthetics of painting. But the question is, to what extent a filmmaker who decides to do so shifts away and doesn't produce a shot or a tableau which is, as you say, imitation of painting. Is there anything that is something that is above that, beyond that, which is takes elements of pictorial or painterly concept of filling the frame with colors, with you know, blocks and various structures and graphic values? Is there anything that is there that cannot be perceived if that image would be not stationary, but would be painting? You know, if you would transfer it in slides. In those filmmakers who are not doing it, when you take a slide from their film and project it, there is no reason. You can get everything what is even when you see the film. In Parajanov, if you make a slide, you lose a lot of things. There is something more than that. And you see this is really the dynamic relation between zones, between foreground, background, a very dynamic, changeable quality of colors, you know, what you just mentioned, the foreground in colors. But Parajanov's foregrounding of colors is different from any, let's say, impressionistic, French impressionist paintings of how he foregrounds the color. So that is the area of serious research. How he does it, which is different and therefore cinematic. But one, again, small note, you know, because this, we are talking this basically for students. Let's then hear that
or the students of the cinema in the most general sense of people interested. But go on. Okay.
You are constantly pronouncing him Parajanov. I pronounce Parajanov. As of course, I'm always think that I'm the best. It should be pronounced Parajanov. I think Americans have problem with pronouncing.
Yes, and I make no claims to knowing
it is not DJ. It is DZH. Parajanov. It's not Sergio, as it's not. He's not French. It's a Sergei or Serge Parajanov. If you want to go, you know, towards the local pronunciation, but it's Parajanov, short J. That means DZH Parajanov. Not
Parajanov.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
now I've got it. Now I've got that point straight.
sorry.
No. Listen, I should stand corrected. I should stand corrected on this. Every major artist deserves to have his or her name pronounced correctly. It's a simple point of decency
anyway,
and respect.
I give the word that I'll not correct you anymore.
Well, you can. Let's say you can disagree. Okay. But let's continue with this notion of color, though, because you were telling me a little while before that you ask him about why he titled the film this way and why he used perhaps these objects or these uses of color. What did he say? I mean, it's simplest.
Yeah, well, he explained to me that this specific film, because you can always, Ashikaribi is the title of the novel and of the leading character. You have to show that film. It marvelously fits, you know, what he, I think it's one step further in exploration of the stationary shot.
Okay.
But Colors of Pomegranate is, in all of his films, in some others, the most beautiful film that, unfortunately, his film between these two on famous, naive painter from south of the Soviet Union, Pirosmani, which is the naive painter. He paints on glass, on the other side on glass and on the naive. Marvelous. Everywhere in these three films and some others, you have a pomegranate as not only national fruit, you know, everything like Ukraine has sunflower, but pomegranates are from Georgia, that's the fruit. So that color is, first of all, very characteristic in all poetry, art, and rituals of Ukraine, Georgia, and southern, you know, Uzbekistan, where the southern fruit. So, but the color is also symbolic, you know. Pomegranate, something in Ashikaribi, he constantly, when he's nervous, you know, he takes a pomegranate and he, you know, sucks the fruit, you know, that liquidity, and the color is marvelous. You have in this film also, you have very often a tree which is not a pomegranate tree, but you have the pomegranates, you know, placed there, like something like you have in Dovzhenko. You have sunflowers where you wouldn't find them. It's a symbolic message. So I think color of pomegranates means that gives the idea of that whole ritual and folkloristic elements of the entire story or entire film, and associating it with that specific environment and nature and the rituals.
Now, that sort of leads us to something about him. Parajanov?
Yep. Perfect. Okay. A minus, because your J must be a little bit stronger. Parajanov.
Parajanov.
Excellent.
Okay.
A.
Thank you. Has had a troubled career.
Yes, 15 years. You see, I learned that. I realized, and you remember, you also signed. We signed letters, you know, to get him out of jail. And when he was here at the New York Film Festival, several conferences, and he said that he was 3 times 5 years. Imagine someone, he's now 50, I think, 4, 5.
Right, yes.
And imagine, not 5, not 15 years in 3 installments. And then he was left, he probably would be 20. But imagine someone of 45 years, he was after, you know, from 30 years, now, I don't know how old he is, but it will be half of my life.
That's right, that's right. No,
not half I'm old.
Well, no, but half of an artistic life, of a central 30 or 40 years of creativity, you're having that, you know, hacked in half. Now the question is, having seen a film like this, what makes him dangerous? I mean, why? And this film, this is a film that was completed, was then on the shelf, not released, As I understand it, it was then a print, left the Soviet Union, and it was shown in film clubs in Paris, in many ways, not only in just because it's a film that deserves to be shown, but in support of the fact that he was at that moment a band artist. What makes him dangerous, or what makes the films dangerous?
But that question can be asked for many other so-called dangerous filmmakers in the Soviet Union, and I think that problem is characteristic for this entire situation that we have now with Glasnost. You know, very often these 50, 60 films that are now re-released, you say, why is this one? But you have to understand the situation and the organization of bureaucracy in the Soviet Union. I have feeling, in Parajanov's case, since we are here,
that's it,
with his film and his art, that he was more dangerous as a private person. He's very outspoken. You remember that he came here and he brought that, the bouquet of flowers, and they asked him, in front of 1,000 people in Lincoln Center, and he put it on the table, and they said, well, he said, I want to explain why I brought this flower, this bouquet. This is my present. And then he said, he was given, per diem, because New York Film Festival pays only trip, and the hotel room. So his Minister of Culture gave him a check, for 5 days per diem. And they told him that's enough. So he said, this morning I went to change my check and they gave me $28. And I said, well, I didn't know what to do. So I went to buy this bouquet. And this is present of the Soviet Union to American people. So
he's on his first trip to the United States.
Yeah, exactly. So this kind of man who was talking so openly and was open in art, open in expressing what he wants in the way he wants, also not hiding that he is gay. He has a complex complication with that. So he was difficult as a man, and I think they used also many other his work, to sort of suppress him whenever it gave them some reason, like formalism. Formalism, when you are for socialist realism, is the great sin, or that it's difficult. You can. Colors of Pomegranate is a difficult film because you have to involve themselves. He said, I asked him, why that staring camera? In relation, contrast to your very dynamic moving of the camera in previous scenes. I want people to involve themselves. I want them to be a part of the process, that when they sit in the auditorium and watch the film or the shot, they have to find for themselves and they have to be active, like directing together with me. So they simply use that as opportunity and saying that he's difficult. When they would tell him that he's difficult, he would immediately make an interview, say that all these critics and bureaucratic party commissars who are telling him that his film is difficult, that they are idiots. So of course they sent him to mental hospital because only lunatic, according to these idiots, can say that they are idiots.
Right. It's the perfect catch-22.
So I think that is, but imagine, it's really tragic for 15 years. I mean, what he would produce. And he's nervous. He's very, sort of...
energetic, and he's full.
But I think he's also, his nerves are, after 15 years, he has some problems. He's very... I would say nervous. He had some problems that he carries from his jail.
Well, yes, sure.
Being there, particularly such a person, to put him in a jail, it's like putting a lion, who can't create and is there, and he doesn't, it's interesting, he doesn't have those frames of thinking as socialist realism or Marxism wants to impose to, not only to every people, but particularly to artists and people of social importance. So he simply doesn't have that. So I think it affected his mental structure and his nerves.
We had several weeks ago, we had the Georgian director Eldar Shengalaya on the show, whose father...
He was personally here.
Yes, he was personally,
that's interesting.
Personally here. Now, what was very interesting is that his father had died a natural death, but really quite young, having lived through the Stalinist purges of the 30s. And Shengalaya, in conversation, actually this was not, I believe, on the show, but in other conversation, said, I'm going to say something that sounds extremely strong, and it could be interpreted, but I don't mean it in any sense in a sexist way. He said, it is like a woman who must, for an artist, particularly a film artist, who must gather together so many, not only mental, but physical and financial resources to mount a project. He said, living for my father, particularly through the 30s, it was like a woman who must suffer numerous abortions as the only means of imposed birth control. And he said the sort of damage that that would do to a woman, physiologically as well as emotionally, is what he, as a child, observed happening to his father. His father was, by his early 40s, a complete wreck, physically and emotionally, because he would work for 18 months on a project and get a set of approvals, and then it would all fall to pieces and everything. And so I think we're simply saying that Parajanov is a contemporary example of a man shell-shocked or whatever, shocked by not only the experience of imprisonment, but of having such a strong artistic personality.
And religious attitude. I think even Colors of Pomegranate, in addition to the ritualistic elements of the composition of the shot and folkloristic use of the elements, there is a strong sort of idealistic belief in a greater power, and that was another thing that he's not materialistic, he's not Marxist, dialectic materialism is not part of his worldview. And he doesn't have it because he is very, very realistic. I remember that conference also, he said that one of his people who was helping him with the film, that he said before he left, he went to the hospital, he has a cancer, and said, I think he is now dying. Would you stand up all and be quiet for a minute? And then he, crossed himself in Russian as I do, and then he prayed for that man in front of 1,000 people. And believe it's not a pose, You feel that it's so authentic and straightforward, and you accept it. And we all stood and said, thank you, spasibo, spasibo, Господь помилуй, Господь. And you believed. And he has something childish. Right, he has something, but then from that childishness, that unspoiled feelings that he still bears within his intellectual and emotional structure, I think is so strong. Then when something bursts, like a vision, like a composition of the shot, like a story, then it's great.
Yeah, see, to me, I want to get back to this way in which he challenges, because I think there are some challenges that he poses. I certainly think just his personality, his outspokenness, this notion of the spirituality which is irrepressible in him and in the art. Yes, also this notion of the frame of the film that must be inspected. But see, I think there's also something about the fact that he is not within the orbit of the Moscow and Leningrad studios, that his concern is very, very deeply that of his region, and that there is a way in which he's characteristically through the films, but I mean most particularly here, he's concerned about this particular place and its sense, its feeling, its people, and it's not a view that in any sense points forward to a future in which this place will be fulfilled because a Marxist revolution comes. No, this is a place that has an autonomous history, an extremely rich and vibrant one that need not be necessarily attached to later historical events.
I would agree with you. Only a little change,
Okay.
You said he's interested in the Southern folklore, which is part of his childhood, and he's a great, connoisseur of paintings, particularly of icons. Okay. I wouldn't use the word he's interested in. Great artists are not interested in anything. They have inside them something, and that's what is part of him, and he simply expresses it. Right. So it's not like I'm interested now in Western movies. Now my interest is somewhere else. He's simply so unique, He's a natural phenomenon, You have artists who are natural phenomena. You simply can't it's very difficult to discuss with him. But then, after a certain period of time, he suddenly reveals something so strongly, For example, I asked him, why there's such a long duration of the shot? Not only stationary, but in both films. I mentioned the Colors of Pomegranate and Ashik Karim. I said, he calls me, I don't know, Herb. He confused me with Herbal Marshall. I said, Herb, he said, these films I made, so honestly, these films I made for children, and they have to look and find. He made these films for children. He wanted he said this, so his mind is making films for children. And doesn't mean for great artists, great poets made films for poems for children with equal engagement. You know, there is no. You know,
there's of course this marvelous irony to that this is attacked. That these films are attacked at the level of this abstraction, formalism.
Children understand better spontaneously, and yes, he made for them. They have to need exactly because I would say. Then I said you are right because basically, general film spectator is a child.
Right.
You know, so but he treats them as a child who's really interested in something deeper than simply being run, you know, through suspense, you know, and he wants them to explore because he gives them material to go back to your statement how these colors are foregrounded in colors of pomegranate, you know. Absolutely, colors have a ideological and dramatic function. Not only colors, how they place you within the shot, but the replacement of a color gamut, you know, a unity of colors in one shot that you perceive, you penetrate it, particularly long. I remember several long shots of the landscape and then to a detail in which one color that is part of the previous general composition is now foregrounded with a close-up, you know, and it suddenly becomes more important, you know, and it does something to your perception. And if it's done 100 or 200 or 1,000 times through the film, it has its own message. The structure becomes the message. Right. So it's so complicated, although it looks so simple.
Well, that leads me also to this notion of how his principles of narrative construction differ not just from what we're used to in Hollywood cinema, but in fact from socialist realism. Because, you know, if you look at a big American war movie like Tora, Tora, Tora. I'm just saying that. Or you look at something like some of the Ozerov war epics, something like that. In fact, while the good guys are the Americans and one of the good guys are the noble Russian soldiers, in another, they follow similar principles. You have a certain set of characters. They have a certain set of problems that must be solved that have to do with usually defeating the enemy, defeating the enemy's ideology, and it usually has to be done on some kind of deadline. I'm just using the war genre just for the moment, comparatively. And you know, they in fact, as long as you make those little substitutions of this ideology for that, they work perceptually and narratively very, very, very similarly. With Parajanov, he is Parajanov. I did it again. Okay, thank you.
Practice
make perfect. Why am I reminded of the Ionesco play about the pupil? In any case, this show will not end with my death. I promise. Okay. The thing that strikes me is that he is attracted to these episodic forms of structure.
Even segmented.
Segmented, yes, exactly.
How do you relate it to Hollywood genre?
Well, because the Hollywood genre always wants this strong causality going from scene to scene to scene. So? And he likes to segment it so that what you have is a segment of the narrative which has a whole set of interests in revelation about a sensibility of the culture of the particular character, but then that's closed off. It's not strictly predictable, except perhaps by chronology, that you're going to move forward in chronology. But where you're going to go from here to there, which next segment is going to be chosen, is quite different from the Hollywood notion of causality. Well, the next place we need to go is to destroy the battleship at X location. So then you know exactly where you're going to go. So he takes apart this causality that can be easily linked to ideology.
I agree with you. But yet he does something on another level, on the level of the sound. We didn't discuss that.
Okay, sure.
Sound, which is so important. A lot of these later films, they're all shot without sound, you know, and then sound is added later so that he can manipulate. So you have two levels of the sound. One is basically music, and that's the music, diegetic music, the music that is created by the source within the shot. And then you have a commentary music over the shot, and then you have a commentary. Someone is talking.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
So you have several levels, but I think sound is more symbolic. You have a lot of noises that are like realistic sound.
Sure.
But sound that includes, particularly sound of music, of local music and symphonic music, I think is something that connects these shots. You know, it indicates what's going to happen. At the end of the shot, it says whether it's going, you know, towards either the positive or negative feeling. So I think sound is important as a supplementary, as a complementary element of his structure.
Let me now ask you something about that. How would you say his use of sound in that way differs from, say, the way in which in American film, John Ford and many of his soundtracks for his films would use folklorific or traditional American songs to get us from one scene? I mean, I think you're saying something quite different, but I'd like for clarification on that.
It is different, but it has also some elements of similarity. I think the sound is not served only to illustrate the exact event, mise-en-scène that's going, like Mickey Mouse, you know.
Yeah.
It gives you element of the mood which is there, but it also anticipates, you know, of something that's going, you know, how it's created. And it, first of all, it always runs to the next shot, to the next one. So it is connecting. I think it has something of that romantic concept of moving from one mood and then giving you stimulation, stimulates your imagination or your oral imagination that you are going to something very dynamic or something that will be tragic or something, although tragic sequence, that it will develop into something positive, something glorious. I think that in that sense, I would say there's, of course, great American directors that use music in the genre not only as a Mickey Mouse illustration or action or Hitchcock, but it also has a more metaphorical.
Okay. So, and that gets us back to one of the ways.
You know, you mentioned that as a difference, but I think there are similarities.
Well, I thought it was a strong. I thought it was a very, very strong similarity. So I wanted to make it clear whether or not we're talking about difference or similarity. You're just taking a note, but you know we've got a problem here, and that is that we've just about run out of time, so you won't be able to use that note.
No. This is not that I was inspired by you, as you corrected me, as I corrected you in the sense how Parajanov's name has to be. You corrected me and gave me the idea about use of the sound, so I'll develop it and I make a note.
So we weren't study.
I'll study your idea further.
Okay, so we weren't Marxist, but we were at least dialectical in our in our discussion.
We are complementary. Thank you.
Okay, if you would like more information about Cinema Then, Cinema Now, write to Cinema Then, Cinema Now, the College of Staten Island, New York, 10301. Let me give you that information again, okay? Write to Cinema Then, Cinema Now, the College of Staten Island, New York, 10301. Well, Vlada, this 30 minutes went extremely rapidly. Somebody like Parajanov brings out idea after idea, as well as the fact that you're full of idea after idea. I want to thank you for being here, and I hope you'll join us again
With
sometime.
greatest pleasure.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that our conversation here, in fact, leads you to conversation and thought and discussion at home that you enjoy. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye. Well.